Welcome to the Edges of Lean. I'm Bella Engelbach, and in this podcast we explore the human and creative side of lean thinking, unusual places where lean thinking is practiced. We meet people who are practicing continuous improvement in many different flavors and styles. So come along with me on a journey to the edges of lean. Episode 65, Continuous Improvement and Crowdsourcing Great Decisions with Soushiant Zanganehpour. In Lean, we know the value of getting ideas from the people who are doing the work, especially when it comes to ideas for improvement. But what happens when your organization feels like it is just too big to effectively get ideas from everyone? What if you're just too far away? Soushiant Zanganehpour is a social scientist and an entrepreneur, and he is the founder and CEO of Swae, a platform for crowdsourcing innovation and making inclusive decisions powered by artificial intelligence. Let's hear what he has to say. Soushiant Zanganehpour, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Thanks, Bella. Nice to see you, and thanks for having me.
Tell us about yourself and your company. What is it that you do, and what was your path to doing that?
Ooh, long story. Let me shorten it up for you. My name's Soushiant. I am a social scientist and entrepreneur. Background as a policy analyst and strategy consultant. Started a few different companies, the most recent of which is Swae. I'm the founder and CEO of Swae, and Swae is a platform for bottom-up and collective decision-making. It helps groups of people come together to surface ideas that would generally not be kind of on the table, help them collaborate on those ideas and float the most engaged and most popular ones to the top for institutional decisions. The reason I came up with this was to help give people a voice that traditionally don't have a voice in decision-making processes, so that the companies, leaders, and ultimately shareholders benefit from all of this untapped collective wisdom that resides in a lot of organizations.
And I think that's something that organizations say a lot. You know, they will put on the wall that they value the knowledge, experience, innovation of their employees, but it certainly is a struggle to make that a reality, right?
Yeah, there are two aspects to that. Yeah, I think you're really insightful to pick up on that. There's a lot of lip service to this sort of DEI or inclusion, or the best way to say it is the dignity of those employees, right? Part of giving people a voice is to give them an equitable amount of dignity. The problem is it's twofold. One is that most companies don't have really great processes in place to allow this sort of free flow of knowledge and insight and information from the bottom to the top. They're heavily trying to control it and contain it with the use of surveys and other forms of tools. The second thing, I mean, that's an easier problem to solve than the second problem. The second problem is that most leaders are not culturally prepared to hear ideas that they haven't asked for. They're not culturally prepared to be told to do things that may not have come from themselves. And it's a much bigger problem to try to solve than the first problem.
How did you become aware of this? How did you start to see this as a problem that was big enough to deserve attention and essentially to spend quite a bit of your life working on it?
I think there's a two-part answer to that. I think the first starts with my own background and training. I would say I'm a product of the Iranian Revolution. My parents left Iran in '89 following the change in government process and system there. And so we came to Canada, and I just from a very young age became very acute and sort of very sensitive to systems of power and how they're concentrated and what people do with power. So that's what I studied in university. I was a political scientist, and I studied public policy, did a master's and other stuff. So, always kind of looking at systems and how it creates a bidirectional flow of power. I think where it got really real for me was in the workplace. I was head of strategy and operations for a venture philanthropy center in Oxford called the School Center. I had a pretty sizable budget to spend every year on investment decisions, programs, research, partnerships, convenings, all to sort of support the thesis of that center. And what I experienced was that the decision-making process, while the lip service was it's collaborative and bottom up and blah 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 blah, it was extremely top down. The divine wisdom of what we should or shouldn't do was determined already by a board of directors that sat somewhere else in Palo Alto, who would fly in.
And you were in Oxford, so that was pretty far. So pretty far from where the work was happening.
Yeah, and this is pre-COVID, where we didn't really have remote work and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So it was pretty foreign for me to have these directives sort of handed from the top down, and we're just sort of meant to implement most of them. And there wasn't really a constructive debate, an ability to, challenge the assumptions that were being baked into a lot of these decisions. So I experienced it firsthand, and I tracked a lot of the decisions we ended up making, and the majority of them underperformed, both in terms of financial or programmatic impact kind of performance metrics that we were tracking. And the worst thing was the program managers, my subordinates, the people that I was managing, that were supposed to be engaged and ensuring these things would deliver, had no buy-in into the program's success because they didn't create them. They were just told what to do. So the insight for me was that, interesting. Because we chose a very efficient but very flawed top-down decision-making process, we have these consequences. We have all these externalities, right? Underperformance and loss of human capital. Had we done things slightly differently, maybe we would have had better performance and much more engaged people. And what is that other way?
And were these sort of big decisions that once those decisions were made, that was locked in and there was not much opportunity for testing the decisions?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, the way it worked was you were funding programs. You were funding one set of programs versus another. So
versus another set. Mm-hmm.
To fund a program, you also need to attach a series of metrics and a measurement system to that to ensure that things are on track and that you're collecting data to report back on either quarterly or semi-annual basis, right? So it wasn't like a startup where you're like, oh, let's just try 5 things and see what sticks. And do that iteratively. It's like, no, there was a very concerted effort on the design and who's in charge and how much resource would go towards it, and you have to report back to the foundation on how that money was spent and stuff. So there wasn't much room for iteration, I would say.
So input that because you gave input and the program managers gave input, you gave input, the input wasn't taken, and then the decisions were made in a way that was, as you said, there was not much opportunity for iteration. So that was really big opportunities actually to make really big mistakes, right? Sort of unrecoverable mistakes with that funding.
Yeah, I mean, if you have really deep pockets, then maybe this sort of money doesn't matter so much to you or whatnot. But I think for the average person, these are consequential decisions. We're talking about a $5 million U.S. annual budget to spend on different sorts of things. So it's not inconsequential.
Right, right.
And I think this was a center trying to help mainstream the understanding and the application of impact investing and social entrepreneurship. So businesses trying to use their business to create social and environmental good in the world. And I thought that we could have leveraged our brand and our assets way more to create the impacts that we wanted to, and just fell on deaf ears.
So I want to go back to a phrase you used earlier, which is systems of power. And I've been reflecting on this. I think in the business world, people who are coming up in the business world, we talk about things like decision rights. We talk a lot about employee engagement. We talk a lot about how to make sure that you are getting the most out of the people who are walking through your doors. Hopefully, you're also talking a lot about how to make it a really good, positive experience for them, so that they continue to grow while they're there. Though that, doesn't always happen, as we know. But I don't think, and I'm a regular reader of HBR, right? So, we don't talk much about the systems of power, and we don't talk about kind of what's happening underneath that from really a social aspect, where, we start out in any organization, we start out with a class structure, don't we? I mean, we do start out with a class structure. If somebody started as a janitor and ends up as a CEO, that's extremely surprising, right? And that would be something that you wouldn't expect. We see class, and we see ethnic and racial differences among these sort of invisible case that we have inside organizations. I don't think we talk about that. I mean, I think you talk about it, but I don't think we talk, much about that. There's lots of reasons for that. It's uncomfortable. If we're the person on the top or heading for the top or trying to get to the top, we might not want to upset the hierarchy. I was wondering, this is kind of an off the wall question, but is this wired into human society to always want to be hierarchical, or is it something that we can unlearn?
That's a very, very, very deep question, and it's one that I'm grappling with quite regularly. Yeah. I think that we probably have a predisposition towards some kind of hierarchy. Hierarchy has, I think, allowed us to organize and to move forward efficiently. I think the problem that I'm seeing is that those hierarchies are extremely static and inflexible. And inflexibility in a world of constant flux and constant change leads to a lot of negative consequences. And so those hierarchies need to become a lot more fluid, kind of like, swarms that form and disband. And there are these birds, the starlings.
The starlings, yes. The murmurations of the starlings.
Yes, the murmurations of the starlings. Yeah, they leaders are constantly changing based on the dynamics of that group or of that murmuring. I think that we need some degree of, we need a lot more flexibility in our organizational structures to move forward efficiently.
It's that is very difficult because we've built systems around those organizational structures that don't really allow that, right? So I've had the experience of being in an organization that really was moving very much to project-based work, and having teams form and then disband when the project was over, but couldn't really figure out how to pay people and how to move people effectively, essentially from one swarm to another, from one team to another. So frequently what would happen is the project would end, the team would be disbanded, then people would be let go. right? And so one side of the company, there's all these people who have completed projects who are then leaving the company, and then there's this huge effort on the other side to hire new people for new projects. And so the ability even to flexibly move people from one project to another, the HRS systems, I have to say, Soushiant, didn't really allow that to happen, right? So it was like the HRS systems are built for a hierarchy, but it's sort of a team-based, cross-functional team-based environment with teams flexing and, coming and going. The HRS systems didn't seem to be able to keep up with that.
I find that that there's some really interesting experiments and insights coming out of the decentralization space, mostly from these DAOs, these decentralized autonomous organizations that once they pitch for funding or coordinate a team amongst themselves, and there are a lot of tools that are being built. Like Coordinate is one tool that comes to mind that allows people to self-assign roles, tasks, and remuneration structures amongst their group, and based on some kind of consensus mechanism of them just agreeing that that's the right way to go about it. That's how resources are distributed. That's how work is distributed. That's how rewards are distributed. And once the project disbands, I think there's some collateral or some artifact of what has happened that is registered on the website, the Coordinate kind of website, and then then they earn a reputation. So the next time something comes up, then there's a track record of how they performed in that project. So
the artifact, the knowledge retention artifact, also becomes in a way the resume of the people on that team.
Essentially, yeah. So going back to your question of like, are we hardwired for hierarchy? It's a very deep question. Part of the challenge that we've seen, initially when we first started Swae, we thought, oh, this is like, obviously a better, more flexible, and less threatening approach to decision making. Why would you not want to have many options on the table to select from? Why do you only want the 2 or 3 that are in your own mind? And through the course of implementing Swae or trying to bring it to market, we realized, oh my God, like, man, do older leaders, and not to be ageist and stuff, but people from the boomer demographic are just not used to having systems of inclusion. This is a foreign concept to a lot, especially in the workplace, and they see this as a threat to their autonomy or a threat to their decision-making power. They also see it as a distraction away from the real work.
For the real work, right.
They think, what could my subordinate really know more than I know about the context of this problem? And it's like, well, you'd be surprised what they already know that they're not surfacing because they're afraid. Or you'd be surprised at the creative solutions they may have that might complement what you're already thinking of. So culture still stands in the way of these types of systems coming into place.
Right, and that is, we see that a lot in lean deployments, that one of the hardest things for a leader to do if they've decided that they want to do something like lean is to take that time to step back, step into, actually go and see what's happening with the work, and ask the kind of questions that elicit creative thinking from their employees, instead of saying to the employees something like, well, when I was doing your job, this was the way I did it, and why aren't you doing it that way, right? And I think it is cultural. I do agree with you. It's cultural, right? And it's cultural both in terms of the larger society and probably cultural inside an organization, that the higher you are, which probably in many organizations also goes with your age, then the more you're supposed to have the answer, and the less you're supposed to be asking questions. And if you do ask questions, they, sometimes they're sort of faintly or legitimately accusatory questions, and that's a culture that we're raised in. So you
But I
can
have good
give
news.
people a tool. You have good news. Let's hear the good
I have
news.
good news. So I don't want to show the tool, but I sort of want to help you see where we think the world is going based on the trends that we see piling up. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share a couple of slides with you.
Yeah, well, we will include in the show notes for those people who are listening. We'll include in the show notes a link to where you can find the slides.
Okay, great.
So I'm gonna, I will, yeah, let me, hang on. All right,
awesome.
Go ahead.
Great. All right, so when we were trying to help some of our investors and others understand the shifts we see, we thought of this as like a scaffolding of trends that lead to a very inevitable understanding of the future. So the first really important thing to take note of is that trust is in free fall. Trust in institutions, trust in leaders, it's really, really low. It's lowest than it's ever been based on the Edelman Trust Barometer. That is a study that happens every year. So 1 in 3 people don't trust their employer. 48% view government and media as a divisive force in society, and a number of other sound bites that show that this is an irreversible issue. And this is
globally, or is this North America?
Globally. They look at, I think, 27 countries from which they derive the barometer. Juxtaposed to that is decentralization is rising. We went from a $4 billion market, decentralized finance, 3 years ago, to a $93 billion market today. This is a 10x on 10x every year on year. The same trend is happening in the decentralized autonomous organization space. Another important trend is personalization that's rising. People are, because of the internet, because of our more, I think, ability to curate experiences and whatnot, people are having much more personalized experience as a consumer out in the world. They can tailor their experiences, tailor their shopping needs, all that sort of stuff. And it's sort of a winning strategy as well for winning over loyalty. So they're experiencing this.
And we experience that also in what is advertised to us, right? So it's not just that we go to the website of a company where we normally do purchasing and find that they are presenting us stuff that is similar to what we bought previously. It's also that in all of our interaction, screen-based interaction, we're people at the companies are constantly looking out for who is this person and what is going to interest them.
Exactly, yeah. Next, I think demographics and values are shifting. Millennials and Gen Z make up the largest percentage of the labor force and voters globally today. And they have just different expectations and values about how society should function, how the workplace should function. Another important thing you should see, I think this relates very much to trust, is that social movements and social unrest is highest than it's ever been before. 3-time increase in the number of protests around the world compared to 15 years ago. And this is the most, I think, interesting and hopeful fact that's coming, is that the guard is changing. By 2025, while millennials are like the largest part of the labor force, they only make up about 11% of management in companies. But by 2025, they will be the majority of managers and decision makers in most companies. And I bet you're going to see a completely different set of realities surface from there. Different sort of power balance.
So is your expectation that I'm thinking about people who have for years felt that their voice wasn't heard, when they are now in the position of being the people in power, if we're talking about power structures, that they will be excited to hear other people's voices, or will they be saying, hey, it's my turn now?
I think it's the latter for me. I think that they will create systems that allow voices to be heard more regularly, because when you've been shut out and you have empathy for that problem, that empathy doesn't go away just because you're in power. I think some people might. You know, we are a weird species, a contradictory species. But for the most part, I think you're going to see different types of institutions and different types of systems be shaped. And so these are some other trends that I see as well. I just want to share these to sort of help paint this picture. Like, employee activism has never been higher than it is today. If you look at Starbucks alone, December 1st, 2021 was their first attempt to unionize. By January 31st, 2022, they had, I think, 19 or 20 stores that had been unionized. And this sort of trend carries across Amazon. It's carrying across a number of other well-known, popular kind of places. Great resignation isn't going away. People are still leaving their jobs, hoping for something better. Disengagement is still really widespread. 80% of employees say that they're not engaged in the workplace. And this comes from really, really well kind of defined research.
And that has, I think we know it has more to do with who is leading them, supervising them, than almost anything else, right? It's
The last thing I'd say is, and we forget these other ones, is that there is a correlation between how much we're using social media and how much that's influencing our sense of power or our sense of voice, and the kind of opposite experience to that when we go into the workplace or we go into our cities or into our political systems. You can be a famous creator, an influencer, you know, someone that's bigger than certain institutions online, but you have no voice, no say, no ability to shape anything in the places that really matter, which is your, you know, place of work or your municipality or city or whatever. So there is there's a weird imbalance that will get sorted out in time.
Yeah, and I can see that even being, you know, I'm just thinking if my next door neighbor was a huge social media influencer, and then they said they wanted to go to our local township meeting, people might look at them and say, well, what do they know? They, you know, all they do is make TikToks, right? You know, and so they might actually, their knowledge and their experience might be downgraded simply because of their influence, strangely enough.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, depends on the type of influencing they're doing, right?
Yeah. If it's,
So maybe we have blind spots in the, you know, data that we've chosen to highlight, but it does tell a compelling story that there's no kind of going back to, oh yeah, like all these trends are moving in a certain direction, and somehow we're going to be like happy electing better leaders. I don't think that's the problem. The problem isn't about electing better leaders or having, you know, that be an antidote. The problem is building systems that can help us listen and filter high quality ideas quickly so that we can move at the pace we need to, and we can move together in a direction that's important.
So this is what your company is about then, is?
Yeah, basically Swae is this SaaS platform, this you know, software that helps you implement a meritocracy inside your organization. It allows you to set up missions or campaigns, sort of leadership driven questions that you want to collect solutions from your staff or customers or whoever from. And the beauty though isn't, it's not a free-for-all. Anyone can put ideas, but only the ideas that have the most engagement, the most debate, the most constructive criticism, those are the ones that go to a review. So you get to set some metrics, determining what that bar is that ideas need to surpass in order for them to be worthy of management time. So it's the best of both worlds. It's inclusive, but also efficient. And you sort of need that in order to make this work.
So contrast that with, say, sort of a Shark Tank competition inside an organization, which I've seen implemented, So what's the does this, I guess I'll put my question a different way. I think one of the challenges with ideas is that it's often difficult for people to disassociate the idea from the ideator. Right?
Yeah.
So if the person who has a really interesting idea is somebody who is, from a certain department, is of a certain gender, perhaps doesn't, have a degree, you don't know this person, which is also very important in sort of management hierarchies, they will struggle harder to get their idea heard. So does this software allow the idea and the ideator to be disassociated in some way?
Yes, we have a conditional anonymity built into Swae. So that means people can choose to be anonymous when they're putting their idea forward, and it gives them the maximum opportunity for that idea to be debated based on its merits, not based on the identity of the person behind it. Because maybe I'm a jerk in the company and people just stay on my idea because I'm that person. Or maybe I'm really popular and people feel like they need to support it because I have power or whatever. So that was one thing that when I was experiencing what I experienced in my workplace, I was thinking, you know what? Like, what if we could all put our idea forward, but it was anonymized? And the ideas that got the most debate were the only ones that went to the board. And the board would have to decide, hey, this one sounds really good. And we don't know who it came from, but like, this is a really sensible idea. Like, we should explore this further. So that's, that's sort of some of the features that Swae enables.
Wow. Well, I think that's really great. Because I was going to say, actually, some of the issue with the Shark type competition is that the person who is the best at speaking in front of executives, has the most personal charm is the person who may get further along in that competition than the person who has a really solid idea or an idea that it has. And I love what you're saying about the debate, right? Because it's most ideas, when they first come along, I would say they're like babies, right? And so they could be ugly, they could be pretty, but you don't know what they're going to be like when they're grown up. And they need usually some care and development and education to become the kind of idea that can really, change a business, give you a new business line, solve a problem that you've been, dealing with for years and years and years.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think like whether it's coming from leadership or from down at the bottom, there's going to be bias in either case. Yeah. The beauty of Swae, and this is how it differs from a Shark Tank kind of pitch competition, is that ideas only survive and get to a decision-making process based on the amount of collaboration that's happened on the idea. So you're going to collect a lot of constructive criticism. You're going to collect risks. You're going to collect strengths. You're going to collect revisions to the idea. You're going to collect votes. Once it's ready to go to a review by the board or whatever, those people are going to be able to see, okay, yeah, this is like, I thought of these risks too. And it looks like a lot of people have raised this, and it looks like, oh, this guy's responded already to these risks and he has a good, rebuttal to it. And it's a much more intelligent way of leveraging intelligence to help you, do what you do better, which is to make decisions.
Right. Yeah. And you're doing it with the energy from and the input of as many people in the organization as are interested and willing to get involved.
And so what's the impact of that? The impact of that, we've looked at so many different studies, and I won't bore you with details, but I think my past training really helped with the design of this system. When people feel heard, they are twice as likely to remain engaged, twice as likely to recommend the place as a good place to work, twice as likely to be retained over a period of time, to bring ideas forward. When they don't feel heard, it's the opposite of all those things. They're 3 times more likely to lose their jobs within a year, 3 times more likely to be disengaged, et cetera, et cetera. And being heard doesn't mean having their ideas implemented. Being heard means having a fair chance at influencing the agenda. When they feel like, okay, I know the rules, my idea made it forward, and for this and this reason, it was selected as not appropriate or not the right time or duplicate of some other effort. Like, people are okay with that. Most people that we've implemented Swae with, we've had like 50,000 users so far. People
Wow.
that have had ideas rejected are 2 times more likely to put new ideas in the platform. But those that don't get any feedback and their ideas go nowhere, just don't engage anymore. And this is the standard type of experience in the modern workplace today.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's so many people who go into work every day, do their work, even if they have a small idea about how to improve their work or something else that the organization could be doing. They feel like they don't get heard, right? Yeah, that's very interesting. I know when I was doing when I was running creativity workshops, we would end up, with sheets and sheets and sheets of post-it notes of ideas to address particular whatever problem we were working on, and people would always say to me, Bella, what are you going to do with these sheets of ideas? And I would always say, and it was true, is, oh, I'm going to keep them, right? And people were really happy that I kept the ideas. Very few people ever came back and said, hey, I want to see that idea again. It's time for the idea, because the process that we had been through of, selecting the ideas that move forward, and, everybody had had a chance to give input to those ideas, to deciding what to move forward and how to improve those ideas. They had buy-in to those ideas that went forward. They didn't feel like they really needed those ideas that were on the post-it notes. I mean, eventually after a couple of years, I'd throw them out, but I always kept them because at the moment, people felt that they needed to know that they were being treated kindly.
Yeah, I think our place in any institution is a relationship. There's a transactional element where you're being hired to carry out tasks, but those tasks require these non-tangible things inside of us, like our empathy, our compassion, our heart, our soul, our commitment. A paycheck doesn't unlock those things. Being treated like a human being, being treated with respect, being treated with dignity, massively unlocks those things. And I think the world will be a much more harmonious place if we have systems in place that continue to allow those things to emerge, versus kind of keeping us in a transactional type of dynamic and a structured dynamic between employer and employee, or citizen and leader, whatever. Yeah,
but I think it's an interesting thing to think about as we continue to move forward, and hopefully we do continue to move forward, right? That means that so many other systems are going to have to change as well, right? So I'm thinking back to my example of the HR systems that couldn't keep up with where an organization was going with flexibility. I think there are a lot of things that are invisible to us in our organizations and the way our organizations work, that as scientists, engineers, business people, we don't pay attention to, because that's not what our job is. Our job is to do these other things. And so as you're thinking about the next generation of leaders, what are some of the things, the other things that you think that they need to be paying attention to? In your ideal organization, what would be?
Yeah, I think coming back to, let me digress a bit. There was a point you mentioned around needing new systems. I think systems self-update. Either they update based off of competitive pressure, or cultural pressure. And I feel like if something like Swae is to really mainstream, it needs to prove that it's more efficient or more productive than whatever is currently in place. If that happens to be the case, then people automatically start kind of moving in that direction because they want to move faster, or they want to have outsized results. So our job, our goal, I think, is to prove the pragmatic parts of Swae and pragmatic parts of this sort of bottom-up decision-making process. And I think you're going to see that emerge from the crypto space in the next few years. I think the volume of capital that will be amassed and deployed, and the kinds of things that people will be able to purchase and govern and sort of manage collectively using systems like Swae will blow our mind. Like, we're on the most popular mainstream example was a group of people that wanted to buy the US Constitution.
The ship or the Constitution?
No, the actual, like the
actual Constitution,
of the Constitution, and they turned it into a DAO, and they raised like $40 million to do so. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was even more than that, but several $1 million to do so in a matter of 6 days. People are using the same mentality to like buy a football club. A bunch of fans that feel like they can run the football club better than professional management because they understand the game better, or they've been loyal longer, or whatever. And really, in the near future, they're going to be able to do that, and then collectively make decisions on what should the management structure be, or what should the training program be, or what should this or that be. If these things prove successful, then, man, we're gonna be in for a real challenge inside our organizations. If people see that outside of the workplace this is possible, they're going to start questioning, why are we doing hierarchical stuff?
Yeah, and that is disruptive innovation, right? That's the innovation that comes from the place that you didn't expect. You didn't expect the fans to buy the team, right?
Yeah.
It's you're going to pass it on to the next generation in the family, or something like that. Wow. So Soushiant, with all of that in mind, you're thinking about a young person starting out right now, what would your piece of advice for them be?
You asked this at the very beginning before we started, and I've been like, marinating on this. I think that they really need to get comfortable with change, because change is going to be a constant that comes our way and everyone's way on an annual basis. Last year it was COVID, or 2 years ago it was COVID. This year it's monkeypox. Next year it's wildfires and other sorts of things. I think that one, like, assume that changes and difficulty will be on the horizon for the next 20, 30 years. And I think the second thing is, like, don't waste your time trying to reform systems that are inherently designed for the past. Build something different.
Build something different.
Yeah, have the confidence to build something different. And it doesn't necessarily need to, like, one of my mistakes, I think, or shortcomings with Swae was that I was so shy about talking about the design and the implications and all this sort of stuff. I felt like I needed to prove every aspect before I could come back and be like, see, it works, see, it's better, see, it outperformed this and that. And over the last few years, we have data and case studies and things that show tangible proof, but putting strong ideas and frameworks out there that challenge the cultural conceptions we have are very, very important in today's world, because other people will go out and build those things, or other people will be inspired to go and build those things. So young people, like, educate yourself about how the system works currently, study economics, study political systems, know your shit, as we say, but don't rest your hopes in these systems saving the future. They're built for a time that has already passed.
For a different time.
We need different systems. We need different things in place, and use your confidence and believe in yourself to go build those.
Wow. Thank you. Very, very good advice. Very interesting. Soushiant Zanganehpour, thank you so much for joining me on The Edges of Lean.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for arranging this talk. It was really, really helpful.
This is Bella Engelbach, and I'd like to thank Soushiant Zanganehpour for being my guest on The Edges of Lean. Are you confident you are hearing everyone's ideas? How are you reaching out? We'd love to hear from you. Find Soushiant at Swae.io or on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn or at leanforhumans.com, or comment wherever you watch or listen. Subscribe and tell a friend about The Edges of Lean. Please join me in exploring more of The Edges of Lean. There's a lot to learn. And check out my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com. You'll find more podcasts and videos with lots of great new content every week. And hey, there are some new podcasts on there too. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbach with support from Podcast Inc. This is a Lean for Humans production.